This Friday, December the 3rd, we celebrate the feast of St. Francis Xavier, who lived from 1506 to 1552. He was one of the greatest missionaries in the history of the Church since St. Paul. He is patron saint of foreign missions, and he is also known as the Apostle of the Indies and of Japan. Born at the castle of Xavier in the Kingdom of Navarre, the Basque language was his mother tongue. He was educated at the University of Paris, where he met Ignatius of Loyola, a fellow Basque. At first, he was not a great admirer of Ignatius, but this changed. He became one of the original group of 7 Jesuits who took their vows at Montmartre in 1534, and 3 years later, in 1537, were ordained priests. He would spend 11 years in Paris, including a time in which he taught Aristotelian philosophy. Ignatius's plan for recognition of the order of Jesuits was approved 3 years after their ordination in 1540 by Pope Paul III. That year also, King John of Portugal requested missionaries to spread the faith in Portugal's new possessions in India. While not assigned at first, then accidentally, in 1540, Francis Xavier joined another of the founding Jesuits, Simon Rodriguez, in Lisbon, and after several months, they sailed on April the 7th, 1541, for Portuguese Goa, India. It was a perilous and arduous voyage lasting nearly 15 months. This was the beginning of his remarkable missionary journeys, lasting 11 years in all, from which he would never return to Europe. Francis, often referred to as FX, did extraordinarily well over the remaining 10 years of his life. Yet, he was constantly frustrated by the immorality, greed, and violence of the European colonists, which undermined the credibility of Christianity. In 1546, in fact, he would write to King John, encouraging him to dispatch a representative of the Inquisition to Goa. FX shamed the Portuguese Catholics in Goa into a more humane treatment of slaves and concern for the poor. He also insisted that the Portuguese men take responsibility for the care of their concubines and children. Mornings he spent visiting prisons and hospitals, and afternoons he summoned children and slaves to catechism class with a bell. He celebrated Mass for lepers every Sunday, and in addition to his preaching, he reached the people through religious verses set to popular tunes. In 1546, he explored other islands in southern Asia. He worked in southern India among the low-caste Paravas, and in Ceylon, Malacca, the Molucca Islands, the Spice Islands as they're now known in modern-day Indonesia, and the Malay Peninsula. He ministered as a poor man to the poor, sleeping on the ground in a hut and subsisting mainly on rice and water. Although he met with much success among the lower castes, he made almost no impact at all on the upper-class Brahmins. Francis began to receive reports of the highly advanced kingdom of Japan, as yet unknown to Westerners. This intrigued him. Then, in Malacca, in December 1547, he met a Japanese man named Anjiro. Anjiro had fled Japan, having been charged with murder. He heard of Francis and traveled to Malacca to meet him. Anjiro told Francis about his homeland, and he actually became the first Japanese Christian. Later, he would help Francis as a mediator and interpreter for the mission to Japan, which now seemed possible. Francis Xavier eventually was able to land in Japan after many adventures on August the 15th, 1549. Fortunately, his arrival came at a time of great political instability there, leaving Japan unusually open to the arrival of foreigners. He made 100 converts in the year he initially spent at Kagoshima. He also had limited success in other locations, but he concluded that he would not be taken seriously as a poor man. So he recognized the sophistication of Japanese culture and realized such methods would be needed in order to preach the gospel to such a people. In a letter to Ignatius, he wrote, it seemed to him, quote, that we shall never find another race to equal the Japanese, unquote. Francis changed into fine robes, and he obtained presents of clocks, eyeglasses, and a music box for the local ruler, indicating they came from the King of Portugal. As a result, he secured the leader's protection and the use of an empty Buddhist monastery. St. Francis Xavier remained in Japan for 27 months. By the time he left Japan, there were some 2,000 Japanese Christians. Within 50 years, while their numbers grew, they were faced with fierce persecution and even death. Meantime, in 1552, Francis had returned to Goa, but he left after a few months for China. Robert Ellsberg notes that while he believed this would be the grand prize of his missionary endeavors, however, this prize would elude him. He fell seriously ill on the way and died on December the 3rd, almost alone on the island of Sanxian, 6 miles off the coast of mainland China and about 100 miles southwest of Hong Kong. He was 46 years old. His body was placed in quicklime and brought eventually to Goa, where it became an object of popular devotion in the Church of the Good Jesus. His right arm, which had baptized so many, was detached in 1615 and is preserved in the Church of the Gesù in Rome. Francis Xavier was canonized in 1622, along with Ignatius of Loyola, Teresa of Avila, and Philip Neri. In 1927, Pope Pius XI published the decree Apostolicorum in Missionibus, naming him co-patron of all foreign missions, along with Therese of Lisieux. Many scholars have placed the number of his converts to Christianity at some 30,000. There are religious congregations named after him. I was taught by the Xavierian brothers for 7 years. Many churches, such as here in Southeast Washington, and the popular San Javier de Bach in Tucson, Arizona, claim his patronage, and colleges such as in Cincinnati and New Orleans as well. Francis is not only co-patron saint of his native Navarre, but also holds patronage of African missions, India, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Macau, New Zealand, Indonesia, Malaya, Pakistan, the Philippines, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and many other places. St. Francis Xavier, pray for us and for all who seek to follow in your amazing footsteps.